Well, they did it. They finally did it. They did the thing that I've been thinking in my head would be a good idea for the past 10 years. I didn't tell anyone about it, but they figured it out and they did it. They made a hybrid motorcycle. This is the first ever hybrid motorcycle. The question is, did they do a good job at it? Intro. Now, first of all, hybrid is not new. They've been doing hybrid for almost 2 decades. It's reliable and they use it in a lot of different types of situations. Now, for me, hybrid makes a lot of sense. And first of all, it's not new technology. Some of the world's most reliable vehicles are non-plug-in hybrids. Now, there's 2 different types of hybrids. There's 2 different segments of it. On this side, you've got the Prius. The goal is ultimate economy. Super economy, slow, boring. On the other side of hybrids, you have Formula One, and you have the LaFerrari and the hypercars. They're all hybrids, and their goal is the exact opposite, super performance. The question is, where does this bike land on that scale? And what I found from driving this thing around for a little while, here's the center. This is the hypercar side. This bike lands just over here. It leans on the performance side of center, but also it leans more towards the performance side of an entry-level motorcycle, which is kind of what the platform of this thing actually is, which we're going to talk about later. So it leans towards a buyer of an entry-level performance bike, or people that do just enjoy the tech. They like the hybridness of it. They like the ability that you can go full EV mode and drive it. It does open up some new interesting possibilities with the EV mode, which we're going to talk about in a second. But what this bike is not, it's definitely not on the whole other side of the spectrum where it's a super bike killer. It's not that. It's not the bike that they created to take down the H2 and all the big bad things. However, I do think that this is the start, and in the future we are going to see the baddest super bikes having the same race technology that they've been using for a long time in Formula One. We're going to see it maybe here first. It might go to racing next, and then eventually the baddest motorcycles are going to be hybrid bikes with that e-boost that gives you an extra 40 horsepower at the press of a button whenever you want it. I think it's a pretty awesome idea to do. It also gives them the ability to make a lower displacement bike, which can hook you up in terms of insurance and some other emissions things. A lower displacement bike that can perform like a bigger displacement bike, which this bike absolutely does. So in 2024, they released this, the Hybrid 7. And they call it the 7 because even though it's a 451, which is the same engine as the Ninja 500, they ran it up very high, they say it performs like a 700cc motorcycle. So let's talk about how the bike actually works. Right here, it's got a 48-volt electric battery, and then up here is the engine directly out of the Ninja 500, a 451 parallel twin. And then up here somewhere is the electric motor. Interesting thing enough, this bike has no starter. It uses the 12-volt battery to power up the electronics to control everything else, and then it uses the motor of the 24-volt battery to actually start it, which is pretty cool because it's always going to have huge starting power as long as the 48-volt battery is charged up. However, the 12-volt battery also needs to be charged up because that's what controls everything else. All right, so the bike has 3 main modes that you need to know about. 1 is full EV mode, 2 is sport mode, and 3 is eco mode. Let's first talk about full EV mode. Now in full EV mode, it's also fully automatic, where it upshifts and downshifts all on its own. It's where the bike runs completely off the 48-volt battery. And you can do about 20 miles of range with a top speed of 42 miles an hour. And the best thing about it is you have no range anxiety. When you run out of battery power, you just fire up the gas engine. In about 45 minutes, it'll fully charge that other battery. And then you have access to your e-boost and everything else. But in full EV mode, it's just a really cool looking, really quiet, completely electric motorcycle. Now, eco mode is made for the optimum amount of economy, combining both engines. So when you start the bike out in eco mode, it'll shut off when you stop, and then unlike cars that we all hate that have that on-off, that shut off when you start and then they turn back on, the way this thing works is when you stop, it shuts off, but like we said, it's not using the electric starter to turn it back on, which delays you starting it. It uses the electric motor to get you going again, and then at like 7 miles an hour, it turns the gasoline engine back on, and then you're good to go. So there's no actual pause in your ability to leave off a stoplight, which is the most annoying thing about those cars that automatically turn off. It also does not give you the option of e-boost. E-Boost is available in the next option, that is sport mode. Now sport mode is starting and stopping. It's using the gasoline engine most of the time, with one exception, that is for E-Boost. We dyno tested this. It actually gives you another 11 horsepower when you press that button. So you feel it. 11 horsepower is about 20%, because when we dynoed this thing, it was 51 horsepower without E-Boost, and then almost 62 horsepower with E-Boost. That's about a 20% bump in power, which is that's a whole lot more than what you're gonna get putting an exhaust on a bike. Now in terms of modifying it, I do think this is a great platform to modify the bike, because you can take all the Kawasaki Ninja 500 parts to modify it and bump it up. You could also do the same stuff that they do with all the electric bikes to modify them, make them more volts, push out more power. So you can modify both engines to get more power on both sides. The problem is, I don't think anyone's gonna do it. I don't think anyone cares that much about this bike, and the demand's not big enough, considering the price is $12,500. Now, even though the price is so big, almost every dealership is slashing the prices because they're having a really hard time to sell. I actually got this one out the door at a state for $5,700, which is kind of mind-blowing. Now, when it comes to downside, this thing's pretty heavy. The normal Ninja weighs just like 415 pounds. This thing weighs just under 500 pounds. So it's definitely not light, but obviously when you're riding it, you don't notice. The other funny thing about it is, and I don't know why they did this, I know why they say they did this, but I don't believe them. The wheelbase is almost 8 inches longer than the 500. Now you think, okay, it's longer than the 500, no big deal. The wheelbase is longer than the ZX14, which is their big, giant flagship, humongous motorcycle. So I don't know why the wheelbase is so incredibly long. They say it's because they need to make room for the battery. I feel like they could have pushed it back a little bit or figured out another way to mount the battery, but whatever. Depending on who you talk to, they're like, oh, it handles awful. I think a lot of people that review stuff, they elevate themselves by bashing something and saying it doesn't handle well. You know, so if I say, oh, this bike handles very poorly, they think the viewer sees that as like, oh, cool, you must really know how to maneuver a bike. You must be really in tune with motorcycles. I didn't think it was that bad. I mean, it's no supermoto, but I've ridden some pretty poor handling motorcycles, and it's definitely not that. Other thing about the bike, you know, you sit on it, the ergonomics are not that of a super sport motorcycle. The bars are higher up than the top of the forks. You know, if it was a super sport bike, it'd be down here. So it's actually a pretty comfortable riding position. Very similar, like the SV650 or an FC07 or something along that categories of just comfort. It's very comfortable, and they have a nice infotainment center on it. I think it's a pretty cool looking bike. When it comes to the styling of it, I think they did a great job. You can tell there's some H2 kind of styling with the open belly pan right here. They got decent quality products. You know, it's got Nissan brakes, not Tokiko or not, you know, not anything above that. However, it does not have adjustable front suspension. And I don't even think you can adjust. You can adjust a little bit of the back. You can adjust the spring of the back suspension. So you can kind of get an idea of who they're making the bike for by the components that they put on the bike and how they put it together. Now, Kawasaki made a pretty interesting claim when they built this bike, and they said it accelerates. Keep in mind, it's smaller than a 500. It accelerates as fast as a liter bike. It's a pretty big claim. Liter bikes accelerate very, very, very fast. However, they have a weakness, and that is the initial 0 to 30 is kind of a weakness in the liter bikes. So when we put this thing up against my 1100cc Honda Blackbird, which is a very fast bike, but an older bike, this actually beat it in 0 to 60. Using E-Boost, using sport mode. E-Boost will hang on for 5 seconds, and then you just twist and go. Because there's no clutch, there's no shifter, which is kind of a negative for me, because I think I could have made it launch faster. If I had a clutch and a shifter, I could have revved it up and dumped the clutch. I could have got it off a little bit faster, but it actually worked pretty good. I did 0 to 30 in 1.8 seconds, which my Blackbird did in 2.0 seconds. The problem with the Blackbird, it's got so much power, you're always trying to figure out, you don't want to flip it, you don't want to do a burnout on it. Now, before we take this thing for a ride, let's go take it back to the shop. I got something else to show you. So here's the thing. This is a brand new, very advanced hybrid motorcycle. And if you own something like this, you need the right parts to keep it running. If you own any motorcycle out there, old, new, do your best to keep it running. That's why we're giving you a shot at $500 in free motorcycle parts or gear from Partzilla. Sign up for a free account using our code right here, or go in the link in the description at partzilla.com/bikesandbeards. The best thing about it is Partzilla stocks OEM and tons of aftermarket parts for pretty much every motorcycle you can think of. From all the stuff that I like to ride, brand new cutting edge sport bikes like this, or classic vintage motorcycles, that I'm still trying to maintain and keep running. If it's got 2 wheels, they probably got the parts. They also do parts for ATVs, side-by-sides, and even automobiles. Plus, they do a best price guarantee and free shipping on all orders over $149. Enter now through Labor Day, and click on the QR code right here or the link below and check out Partzilla's massive catalog. Huge thanks to those guys for helping keeping bikes like this at their peak performance, but also all the other bikes that I got sitting around my shop. All right, so before we take this thing out for a spin, let's do the words of wisdom. Nahum 1:7. The Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble. He knows those who take refuge in him. The Lord is good. So while I was thinking about it, I know it's hot out here now, but in a couple months, it's going to be pretty cool. But you know where it's going to be perfect? Daytona Beach, Florida at Biketoberfest. October 16th through 19th. And actually, we just dropped a video, the link is right here, of a top 10 list of things that most people forget when they go to Biketoberfest. Check it out. Let's get back to this motorcycle. All right, let's put on the M1 Moto Kevlar lined gloves. I've actually had these gloves for 5 years. I'm still wearing them. I love them. All right, so we'll start this thing in eco mode. You gotta put it in drive. No, first gear. No, what am I doing? Okay, kickstands up. It won't go into like drive unless it's in neutral. So there we go. Check it. Super silent, super quiet, and then it just looked like about 14 miles an hour. The gas engine just pops on. So I've done a little bit of research on what other people think about this bike. I generally don't do extensive amount of research to see what other people think about it, because I want to give my unbiased opinion from my own biases, and I kind of like it. I think it's a pretty cool bike. People complain about a lot of stuff. You know, oh, it doesn't handle that well. Man, have you ridden a big dog chopper? Have you ridden an Orange County chopper? You know, lately, I think it handles fine. You see how it's downshifting automatically? All right, so it's really interesting because the engine is still running, but then the electric motor is still kicking in to start it. So I don't know why sometimes the engine completely stops and the electric motor is starting it. But then other times the engine's running, but the electric motor is still starting it. It's not. I don't understand what's going on there. Maybe it's still warming up. Maybe it's too cold, and it wants to warm up. And maybe the more we ride it, the more it'll turn off at stoplights. So on eco mode, it will not give you the option for e-boost. It is kind of fun though how they gamified all this stuff. That right there is my like 12-volt battery. Now you might think that, oh, it's going to be a lot slower on eco mode. That's just not the case. It's not any slower. It does not give you the option for e-boost. But it's not like, you know, it's dangerous to be in eco mode in case you have to pass somebody. You still have all the power, all 50 horsepower out of the, 500cc Ninja motor. Let's see if we can switch it on the fly to sport mode. Yes, we can. All right, cool. So now sport mode change. The whole gauge change, and then check this out. E-boost. It's actually pretty impressive. When I'm saying it's impressive, I mean compared to a 500cc Ninja or a 451cc Ninja. Not impressive compared to a liter bike or a 600 or any type of super sport or anything that has some real power. But, you know, it's a little tiny engine. It's a little tiny twin-cylinder engine that does make not awful power, but that e-boost does kind of make it fun. Now, I was told that the reason it's flashing is because it wants me to be at lower RPMs than what it's showing me. So let me see if I can even get it at low RPMs, so low that it'll stop flashing on me. Nope, there we go. So it wants the braking to be less than 4,000 RPMs. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not even sure if that's the best way to brake in a motorcycle. Yeah, you could say Kawasaki knows how to brake in their own motorcycle. I'm sure that's true. All right, passing gear. Another cool thing is you can kick in that e-boost. Don't even bother, you don't even have to bother downshifting. Just kick in the e-boost, do your thing, pass. Everything else about the bike
you know, is gonna feel very similar to a Ninja 500. It's been a long time since I've been on a Ninja 500. I've not been on any newer Ninja 500s, so I don't know if they have these raised bars or if they got clip-ons. I would assume that they have bars like this. Now, the other thing Kawasaki came out with, and I don't know how it's doing, around the same time they came out with a all-electric bike. I've not had my hands on that one, but if I can get one for as cheap as I got this one, I'm kind of inclined to try to pick it up. All right, let's try 0 to 60, and let's do it with e-boost. Go. Wow. I'm not gonna lie, that got to 60 pretty quick. Holy cow. This thing is getting faster. I wonder if the tune is slightly changing as it's wearing in. I might actually try 0 to 60 again, because that was significantly faster than I thought it was gonna be. I didn't even see the 30. I was just, bam, I was at 60. I'm excited to see what that launch time is. So I'm serious when I think I really do like the idea of hybrids. It does make sense to me. The biggest downside is just the extra weight. That battery is probably gonna last a long time. That big 48 volt battery, that could last 150,000 miles. So I'm not concerned about that, especially since the engine, it's the engine and the computer, like the computer regulates how much power it has. It's gonna know to make sure it never goes super drained, or it's not gonna overcharge, or it's gonna deal with all that stuff. So I don't see why that you wouldn't conclude that that's going to last just as long as any other hybrid can last. Now, is it going to be expensive to replace? Yes, although most people riding motorcycles, they're not doing that many, you know, shoot, sometimes you see like, people think 30 or 40,000 miles on a motorcycle is a lot of miles, which it's not, but that's what they think. So if a battery like that could last, you know, 100,000 miles, that's a pretty, you know, you had a pretty good life out of that battery. I'm going to try 0 to 60 again here. I think I shifted too soon. I think this has a higher red line than what I think it does. We're gonna give it one more go. You gotta admit, that launch was pretty good because it's using that electric motor to help assist you in the launch. I pressed the wrong button. It's so weird shifting with your finger. But think about it. That little 10 horsepower of boost can help this bike accelerate that good. But what do you think it could do to a much faster bike? It seems like electric motors have a better ability using traction control to make it smoother, to keep the power on the ground, than just a gasoline motor, because it can be regulated quicker. So that's my theory. Not sure if there's any science behind it, but it does seem like that's kind of how it's working. Guys, I'm pretty pumped about this motorcycle. If you get a chance, check one out, take one for a spin. You also might like this next video right up here. We'll see you guys next time.